Debbie Nelson didn't mean to text a billionaire. She just needed $50 for diapers. Debbie sat in her small, dimly lit apartment, exhausted with her baby, Gabriel, in her arms. The room felt cold despite her warmth against him. His soft whimpers filled the quiet, a reminder of how badly she needed a solution. With no money left for diapers, Debbie's pride kept her from asking anyone for help, especially her brother, who had already done more than his share. Desperate, she typed a quick message. "Can you spare $50 for diapers? I get paid Friday. I'll pay you back." With a deep breath, she hit send, hoping for a miracle. Little did she know the text wasn't going to the right person, and this mistake would change everything. Her phone buzzed a few minutes later. The reply, "I think you meant to send that to someone else." She stared at the message in disbelief. The number wasn't her brother's. It was a stranger's. Before she could apologize, another message arrived. "Is your baby going to be okay?" Confused and unsure, she typed back, "We'll manage." But then came a message that caught her off guard. "I can help, no strings." Skeptical but desperate, she sent her Venmo account. Seconds later, her phone buzzed again. 5,000 had been transferred. "This is too much," she typed. "I only needed $50. The reply was instant. "It's already yours. One less thing to worry about." Debbie sat in shock, staring at the $5,000. She could hardly believe what had just happened. The man who had sent her this money was a stranger, Kenneth Knowlton, a billionaire tech mogul. Who was he, and why had he helped her? The answers would come later, but for now, her life had just taken a turn she never saw coming. Debbie's heart raced as she stared at the screen, her thumb still hovering over her phone. The message she had just received, the one from a complete stranger offering help, seemed too good to be true. It was as though someone had heard her silent cry for help and decided to reach out. The text wasn't a scam, wasn't an offer for a loan, wasn't some pitch for a job. It was just a help, no strings attached. She read it again. "I can help, no strings." Debbie swallowed hard. The words swirled in her mind, the weight of them heavy, too heavy to ignore. She felt a flicker of hope, then a sharp stab of doubt. Who was this man? Why was he offering money? This was far beyond anything she'd ever expected. She had seen too many scams to let her guard down. But the desperation in her voice earlier when she texted for help made her feel like she didn't have the luxury of skepticism. She had nothing left to lose. Maybe it's just a prank, she thought. Maybe this is some sort of twisted joke. But there was no time for second guessing. Her baby's cries had become more insistent, and the cold silence in her apartment was too much to bear. If this stranger's offer was a trick, it would be one she'd pay for, but if it wasn't, it could change everything. Shaking, she quickly typed out her Venmo link. Her fingers stumbled over the keys, her hands clammy with fear and uncertainty. She pressed send. The phone felt too heavy in her hand as she waited, watching the seconds tick by. The silence that followed felt unbearable. She kept thinking about the money, the fact that her son needed diapers and milk, and that the bills still loomed over her head, mocking her with their unrelenting demand. Then the phone buzzed again. Her heart skipped. This time the notification wasn't from a new text. It was a transfer. Her eyes darted to the screen and she opened the Venmo app with shaky hands. The numbers blurred as she saw the amount. 5,000. Debbie blinked, then blinked again, as though she might be imagining things. She opened the app a second time to double-check. It was real. 5,000, not 50. $5,000. Her pulse hammered in her chest as she read the message that came with the transfer. "It's already yours, one less thing to worry about." Debbie sat frozen. The phone felt like it weighed a ton in her hand, her fingers too numb to hold it properly. The screen glowed brightly, and yet everything around her seemed dark, as though the world had dimmed. The room, small and cramped as it was, felt even more suffocating now. The money had been transferred, and her son's cry echoed in her ears, louder now, more urgent. But all she could hear was the buzzing of her phone. Her hands shook as she tried to process what had just happened. This wasn't a scam. This wasn't someone offering her an online loan or trying to sell her a fake miracle. This was real. The money was there, the kind of lifeline she'd never thought she'd get. $5,000 to take care of Gabriel's needs for weeks, enough to cover rent, enough to breathe again. But that wasn't what made her heart pound in fear. What made her uneasy was the man who had sent it. A stranger, a complete stranger. Who was he? Why would someone do this for her? She didn't even know his name at first. She grabbed her laptop from the coffee table, her fingers trembling as she typed the name that appeared on the Venmo transaction. Kenneth Knowlton. Her fingers flew across the keys as she searched for the name online. And then she found it. Kenneth Knowlton. The name didn't sound familiar at first, but the more she read, the more her stomach twisted with disbelief. Kenneth Knowlton was the CEO of Knowlton Enterprises, one of the world's most successful tech companies. He was a billionaire with a net worth in the billions, a man whose name graced headlines for his groundbreaking work in the tech industry. Her breath caught in her throat. She stared at the glowing screen as if it might suddenly change, as if the information could somehow be wrong. But no, Kenneth Knowlton was real, and now somehow he was involved in her life. How? Well, Debbie sat back in her chair, the weight of the screen pulling her down with it. The answer wasn't clear, not even close, but there it was. The money, the man, the strange, impossible kindness. She had to know more. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard again, this time typing out a message to the man who had just changed everything. "Why are you really doing this?" she typed, her heart racing with a mix of dread and curiosity. She was terrified of the answer. But more than that, she was desperate to understand what kind of person would offer such a lifeline to a stranger. She hit send. Her phone vibrated in her hand almost immediately. "I know what it's like to be hungry. No child should ever go without." The simplicity of the message was almost too much. It wasn't a grand gesture, no overly dramatic speech, no promise of anything more. It was a quiet, sincere truth. A truth that rang through the message, hitting Debbie with an emotional force that left her breathless. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Not with such honesty, not without expectation. But there was still so much she didn't understand. Her fingers hovered over the phone again, and she found herself typing the only question that made sense. "Who are you?" She stared at the text for a moment, knowing it was too soon to ask, but the words were there. They felt right. Before she could hit send, her phone buzzed again. "I'm Kenneth. Don't worry about me. Just take care of your son." Debbie stared at the message in shock. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. She had no answers, only more questions. Why had he done this? What did he want from her? And more importantly, what did this mean for her and Gabriel's future? Want to know what happens next? Does Debbie take the leap? Hit subscribe and don't miss out on this roller coaster ride. Debbie sat on the couch, her mind whirling. The $5,000 had been real. Her phone buzzed again and she glanced at the screen. It was another message from Kenneth. She hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. I know what it's like to be hungry, and no child should ever go without. The words hit her harder than she expected. It wasn't just a transaction. It wasn't a random donation. There was something personal about it, something deeply empathetic. It was as if Kenneth had seen beyond her desperation, beyond the brokenness she had so carefully hidden from the world. He hadn't just given her money, he had given her something more, a recognition of her struggle. Debbie's fingers hovered over the phone as she typed, her mind trying to make sense of it all. I don't know what to say, she wrote. She didn't want to sound ungrateful, but what else could she say? It was too much, too kind, too overwhelming. She sat back, waiting for the response that might be the final step in a chain of events that had already changed her life. The phone buzzed again. This time, Kenneth's message was simple but direct. You don't have to, just take care of your baby. His words, though kind, sent a shiver through her. Take care of Gabrielle. It was a command, but one laced with warmth. A part of her wanted to scream at the injustice of it all. How could this man, a stranger, have so much power over her life? How could he make her feel so small, yet so grateful at the same time? But the real shock came when the next message arrived. It wasn't just a continuation of the conversation. It was something completely unexpected. I want to offer you a job. Come work for me. Her heart skipped a beat. She blinked at the screen. A job? From him? The man who had just given her $5,000 without even asking for anything in return? She stared at the phone in disbelief, unable to comprehend what she was reading. Why, she thought, why would he want me to work for him? She felt like she had stepped into some alternate reality. She had sent a simple request for help, hoping to scrape together enough for diapers, and now she was being offered a job by a billionaire. What was he thinking? Her fingers trembled as she typed out a response, not knowing what to say or how to ask the question that had been consuming her thoughts. Why? He typed, her heart pounding in her chest. Why would you want me to work for you? I'm just a single mom who's struggling to get by. I don't have the skills for a job like that. Her mind raced, unsure of how to even begin processing his offer. She had no experience in anything beyond waitressing, and even that had felt like it was slipping through her fingers. What could someone like her possibly offer to someone like Kenneth Knowlton, a billionaire CEO with a tech empire at his feet? Kenneth's response came quickly, as though he had been waiting for her question. I don't need someone with experience. I need someone with heart. Someone who knows what it means to fight, to never give up. I've built this company on the shoulders of people who believed in themselves, even when the odds were against them. You showed me that tonight. Debbie sat back in the couch, stunned. Heart? She thought. Fight? What did he mean by that? Was he serious? Was this just another act of charity, or was there something more behind it? I don't know what to say, she typed again, unsure how to process the weight of his words. I can't work for you. I don't have the experience. I don't know anything about tech. I barely even know how to handle my own life right now. But the truth was, something inside her stirred. She didn't know how, but part of her knew that this was more than just a lifeline for her and Gabriel. This was an opportunity to change her life, to prove that she wasn't just a broke, struggling single mother. The message from Kenneth came almost immediately. You don't need to know anything about tech. I need someone who is willing to learn, someone who understands what it means to be down but refuses to stay there. Come work for me. It's an opportunity for you, and it's an opportunity for me. You can do this, Debbie. Debbie sat there, her hands trembling. Was this real? Was she really considering this? It felt too good to be true. I can't accept, she typed, her fingers shaking. I'm not qualified for a job like that. I can barely take care of myself, let alone start something new. I don't know what to do. There was a long pause, the kind of silence that felt too heavy. Debbie waited for a response, unsure what to expect. When it finally came, it wasn't what she had anticipated. You'll figure it out, Debbie. Don't let fear stop you. I'm offering you this chance because I believe in you. I saw that tonight. The words seemed to echo in her mind. I believe in you. Debbie exhaled slowly as if the weight of his words had just hit her in waves. Could she really take this leap? Could she really go from struggling single mom to working for a billionaire? It sounded insane. But what if he was right? What if this was the chance she'd been waiting for? The break she never thought would come. Her mind was in a haze, trying to process everything. The money, the job offer, the possibility of a life that wasn't defined by struggle. She couldn't help but think about Gabriel, about giving him a better life. Finally, she typed, her fingers hesitant but determined. Okay, I'll do it. I'll come work for you. Her heart raced as she pressed send. She stared at the message, uncertain of what was about to happen next. Was she making a huge mistake? Was she about to enter into something that would change her life forever, for better or worse? She didn't know, but one thing was certain. The course of her future had just been altered in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Debbie stared at the message, her mind racing. A job? The idea felt so foreign, so out of place in her life. She had never imagined a future like this. One where she wasn't just scraping by, counting pennies, or wondering how she'd make it to the end of the month. But here it was. Kenneth Knowlton, the billionaire tech mogul, had just offered her a job. The message was simple. No bells or whistles. I'm offering you an opportunity. No strings. No strings. It seemed too good to be true. She had barely enough experience to be considered for a job, let alone one at a high-profile company like Knowlton Enterprises. She had never worked in tech. She didn't even have the skills most of his employees would have. But Kenneth hadn't asked for any of that. All he had asked for was heart, the willingness to fight, to push through when things were tough. But could she trust him? Could she trust that a billionaire was offering her more than just a fleeting act of kindness, a gesture to make himself feel better? Was there more to this offer than what he had said? Or was she about to walk into something far beyond her understanding? Her phone buzzed again. She jumped, almost dropping the phone in her lap. The same number, the same man. Kenneth, I'll set up a meeting for you. I know you're struggling, but I believe this is the best way for you to get back on your feet. Let's talk. Debbie blinked, staring at the words on the screen, the weight of them settling into her bones. He wanted to talk, not just about the money, not just about what he had already given her. He wanted her to meet him, to see what this opportunity truly was. She shook her head in disbelief. Could this really be happening? Could she really go from asking for help to accepting a job offer from a billionaire? The weight of her reality pressed down on her shoulders. Gabriel needed diapers. Gabriel needed food. There was no end in sight to the daily struggle of simply surviving. The thought of stability, of real work, was intoxicating. It was a dream she'd never dared to have, let alone reach for. But could she trust this stranger with her future? Why me? She wondered again. Why did he pick me? She looked over at Gabriel, who had fallen asleep in her lap. The vulnerability of the situation, the weight of his dependence on her, made her heart ache. This job offer could change everything. It could give them both the life they deserved. But could she really trust Kenneth? Could she walk into his world, into the world of the rich and powerful, and not be swallowed up? Debbie hesitated for a moment, her fingers hovering over the screen. She could ignore the offer, block Kenneth, and go on with her life as it was. She could keep living the way she had been, struggling, always just one step ahead of disaster. But that wasn't really living, was it? Finally, she typed, "When and where?" Her heart raced as she hit send. She wasn't sure what to expect. Was this a real job offer? Was she making a huge mistake? The fear of the unknown churned in her stomach, but a small part of her, the part that had wanted to give up, the part that had been on the edge for so long, finally let out a breath of relief. For the first time in a long time, she could see a way forward. The next morning, she dressed carefully in a simple blouse and dark pants, making sure her hair was neat. She didn't have many clothes that felt appropriate for an interview, but she had to make do. Her shoes were scuffed, but she did her best to clean them off. Gabriel was with a neighbor for the day, and she made sure to leave her contact information just in case. As she stepped out of her apartment and into the busy streets, she felt the weight of the decision on her chest. She was about to walk into the headquarters of Knowlton Enterprises, a company she had only ever read about in the papers, a company whose CEO had just offered her a chance at something she never thought possible. Her heart pounded with every step she took toward the building, every footfall echoing in her mind as she approached the sleek glass doors. She was nervous, unsure what to expect. Kenneth hadn't given her any specifics. He had just asked her to meet him. "I need someone with heart," he had said, "someone who's willing to fight." And yet, here she was, unsure of how to even begin this new chapter. The lobby of Knowlton Enterprises was grand, modern, and spotless. The receptionist looked up and smiled, but it felt like the smile of someone who had seen too many people walk through those doors, too many people who thought they could make it. "Ms. Nelson?" the receptionist asked. "Mr. Knowlton is expecting you. Follow me." Debbie swallowed, trying to steady her nerves. The hallways felt like they were closing in on her as she followed the receptionist, each step a little heavier than the last. They stopped outside a door at the end of the hall. The receptionist gave a small knock before pushing the door open. "Mr. Knowlton will see you now." Kenneth stood as she entered, his tall frame imposing yet calm. He was dressed in a sharp suit, his eyes focused but warm. "Debbie, I'm glad you could make it," he said, extending his hand. His voice was deep, confident. But there was something else there too, something almost kind. She shook his hand, still unsure what to make of him. Her nerves threatened to overwhelm her, but she pushed them aside. "Thank you for the offer," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. Kenneth smiled, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Please sit, let's talk." Debbie sat down, her mind racing. What was she even supposed to say? Kenneth leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "I've been watching you, Debbie. I know about your struggles, but I also know what you're capable of. You have heart. You just need the right opportunity." She blinked, her heart skipping a beat. "I've been watching you." The words caught her off guard, as though he had been studying her, sizing her up. Kenneth's next words came softly but with purpose. "I want you to work with me, and I believe you have what it takes to do more than you think. This isn't just about the money. This is about giving you a chance to rise above everything that's been holding you back. But there's something I need to tell you." Debbie's breath caught in her throat. What was it? What did he want her to do? And why did she feel like she was about to step into a world she couldn't even begin to understand? If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Debbie's hands trembled as she stepped through the sleek glass doors of Knowlton Enterprises, feeling the weight of the decision she was about to make. The building itself was imposing, tall, shiny, and modern, with its glass exterior reflecting the blue sky. The floor beneath her feet was polished marble, cold and unforgiving. She glanced around, her nerves threatening to take over. She barely registered the receptionist, who looked up from her desk with an unreadable expression, but didn't seem surprised to see her. "Miss Nelson?" the receptionist asked, her voice calm and professional. "Mr. Knowlton is expecting you." Debbie nodded, her throat tight as she forced herself to breathe. She followed the receptionist through the large lobby, her footsteps echoing loudly in the otherwise quiet space. The walls were lined with sleek art pieces and bright lights, all designed to showcase wealth, success, and ambition. She couldn't help but feel small in the midst of it all, as if she didn't belong. A woman named Ava, the receptionist, led her down a long hallway. The sound of her heels clicking against the marble floor was the only noise in the otherwise silent building. Debbie couldn't help but notice the polished, minimalist design of the halls. Everything about this place screamed power, sophistication, and professionalism. "Ava, thank you," Debbie said, forcing herself to speak as they approached the door to Kenneth's office. Ava nodded and gave a brief, polite smile before opening the door. "Mr. Knowlton is waiting for you," she said before stepping aside. Debbie took a deep breath and walked into the room. The first thing she noticed was the absence of grandeur. Kenneth's office wasn't the luxurious space she had expected. There were no extravagant rugs or marble countertops. It was simple, clean. There was a single desk and a few chairs scattered around the room, nothing over the top. Kenneth stood by the desk, his posture relaxed but his presence undeniable. His eyes met hers immediately, and for a moment the room felt too still, too quiet. He offered a small, welcoming smile as she entered. "Debbie," he said, his voice steady but warm, "thank you for coming." Debbie's heart was racing, but she gave him a hesitant smile in return. "Thank you for having me," she said, though her voice was tight with nerves. She didn't know what to expect from this meeting. Was this just an interview for a job, or was there something more? She had no idea. Kenneth gestured toward the chair across from him. "Please have a seat." Debbie sat down slowly, feeling the weight of his gaze on her. There was no ornate desk between them, no thick glass walls separating them. The simplicity of it struck her. It felt personal, almost like they were two people who were going to have a real conversation. Kenneth didn't waste time with pleasantries. He sat down across from her, his posture relaxed, but his eyes remained intense, thoughtful. "So," he began, leaning forward slightly, "I'm sure you're wondering what exactly you're doing here." Debbie's hands were clasped tightly together in her lap. She nodded, trying to steady her nerves. She couldn't help but wonder if she even belonged in this room, in this world. She had no qualifications for a job in his company, no high-powered resume, Nothing that would explain why a billionaire like Kenneth would offer her a chance at something so big. Kenneth must have read her uncertainty because he smiled reassuringly. "This isn't about credentials, Debbie," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It's about something much more important. Trust. I need someone who can handle challenges, someone who isn't afraid to do what it takes to succeed." Debbie felt a weight settle over her chest. She had spent so long just trying to survive, just trying to make ends meet, that the thought of actually building something, of working with someone like Kenneth, felt almost impossible. "I know you're probably thinking that you're not qualified for this job, but what I'm offering isn't just a why," Kenneth continued, his voice steady, reassuring. "I'm offering you a chance to rebuild your life." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Rebuild her life. She had never really thought of herself as someone who could rebuild anything. She was just surviving, just getting by. The idea of rebuilding was overwhelming, frightening even. But at the same time, it was a flicker of hope, something that could pull her out of the darkness. Kenneth's gaze softened slightly as he watched her process his words. "I believe in second chances," he said quietly. "I believe that people like you, people who've been through hard times, have something that most others don't, a resilience that can't be taught." Debbie's throat tightened. Was he really seeing her like that? She wasn't sure if she was ready to believe it. She had fought so hard to survive, but it was hard to imagine herself succeeding in a job, in a world so far from everything she had ever known. She tried to find her voice, but the words stuck in her throat. "But I don't have the experience," Sean said, her voice a little shaky. "I can barely keep my life together. How can I work for someone like you?" Kenneth leaned back slightly in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "This isn't about where you've been, Debbie. It's about where you're going. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to believe that you can do more than you think." The simplicity of his words hit her harder than she expected. Believe in herself. Could she do that? Could she really change her life? For the first time in what felt like forever, Debbie wondered if she was more than just the tired, overwhelmed woman who barely scraped by. Maybe this could be her chance to prove that she could be more. But as she opened her mouth to speak, Kenneth's expression changed. The lightness of the conversation shifted, and his gaze grew more serious. "There's something you need to know, Debbie," he said, his voice lower now. "This isn't just a job, it's a chance to uncover something bigger." Debbie's breath caught in her throat. What was he talking about? What did he mean by something bigger? She felt the weight of his words sink into her chest, her heart beating faster as her mind raced. Was this all part of some larger plan? What had she gotten herself into? Her fingers clenched around the armrests of her chair. She couldn't help but feel like she was standing on the edge of something vast, something unknown. She leaned forward, eager to understand. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with anticipation. Kenneth's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Debbie felt like the truth, whatever it was about to be revealed. Debbie's first week at Knowlton Enterprises was a whirlwind. Each day she felt more out of place, yet somehow she also felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The office was sleek and modern, and every desk seemed filled with people who had been working there for years, confident and composed. She had little to offer compared to them, but somehow Kenneth's belief in her kept her going. The work was challenging but not impossible. She was tasked with reviewing some client accounts, analyzing market trends, and compiling reports for the executive team. It was a steep learning curve, but she was determined to prove herself. There were moments of doubt, of course, where she felt like she wasn't qualified to be in this world. But with every small success, every report that passed without corrections, she felt herself growing more comfortable. Kenneth, however, kept his distance. He would check in with her occasionally, asking how things were going, offering a few words of encouragement, but never giving her too much praise. His eyes were always calculating, as if he was evaluating her every move. She found it hard to read him, but there was something in his demeanor, a quiet ambition, a sort of untold pain that intrigued her. On one particularly long day, as she was sifting through a new batch of financial data, something caught her eye. A small discrepancy. It wasn't much, just a minor inconsistency in the numbers. She made a note of it and moved on, thinking it was just a mistake. But the next day it happened again, and the day after that. As she pored over the data, she began to see a pattern, small discrepancies, hidden away in the corners of the company's financial reports. They weren't enough to trigger an audit, not on their own. But the more she looked, the more it became clear. Someone was siphoning off money, and whoever it was, they were good at covering their tracks. The thought gnawed at her. She wasn't sure what to do. She wasn't sure if this was part of the job Kenneth had hired her for. Was this something she was supposed to notice? Was it something she should ignore? Debbie's mind raced as she went over the numbers again. The idea that something larger was at play was too big to ignore. It wasn't just a few errors here and there. Someone was deliberately manipulating the accounts. She stayed late that night, going through each entry, each financial report, line by line. The more she uncovered, the more the pieces started to fall into place. This wasn't a small-time embezzler. This was someone inside the company, someone who knew the system well, who knew how to hide their tracks. But who? Who could be behind this? She had no idea where to start. The deeper she went, the more paranoid she became. Kenneth had brought her in for something bigger, but was she ready for whatever it was? She hadn't expected to find herself knee-deep in a financial conspiracy. The thought made her uneasy. She knew she had to bring it up to Kenneth. He was the one who had hired her for something bigger. But would he want her to dig into this? Would he be angry that she had stumbled upon something like this? What would it mean for her job, for her place in his company? Just as she was about to close her laptop and get some rest, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Kenneth. "Can we meet tomorrow? I need your help with something." Her heart skipped a beat. She stared at the message, unsure what he meant. She had only been at the company for a short time, but she had already started to suspect that there was something larger happening behind the scenes. Was Kenneth aware of it? Or was he somehow involved? She quickly typed a reply, agreeing to the meeting. She needed answers. She had to know what he wanted from her and why he had brought her into this world. What was it that she was really supposed to uncover? The next morning, she found herself sitting across from Kenneth in his office. He was as composed as ever, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something serious. Something that made Debbie feel like this was no ordinary meeting. Kenneth didn't waste time. He got straight to the point. "Debbie," he began, his voice calm but firm, "I know you've been going through the accounts. I know you've seen the discrepancies." Debbie's breath caught in her throat. She didn't expect him to be so upfront about it. She didn't know if she should be relieved or more anxious than ever. "You're right," she said cautiously. "There are some inconsistencies. Some money's been going missing." Kenneth nodded, his expression unreadable. "That's why I hired you," he said. I needed someone who wasn't afraid to look closely, to see what others might miss. Debbie's mind raced. She had been right. This was what he had hired her for. But it wasn't just about doing a job. It was about something much bigger. And now she had stumbled onto something dangerous. Kenneth continued, his voice steady. There's a system at play here, Debbie. Someone within the company is skimming off the top. I don't know who it is yet, but I need your help to find out. Her stomach twisted with unease. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected the job to be about investigating corruption, about uncovering something so personal and so deep within the company. I can't do this alone, Kenneth added. I need someone I trust, someone who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty. Debbie's heart was racing. She had walked into this meeting thinking it was going to be about her job, about learning and growing within the company. But now it was about something much darker, something much more personal. Kenneth leaned in, his gaze steady on hers. You've already proven you have the right kind of heart for this, Debbie. But you need to understand something. This isn't just about money. It's about loyalty, trust, and uncovering a truth that could shake this company to its core. Debbie's breath caught in her throat. What was she about to get involved in? And more importantly, could she handle it? Debbie sat in the dim light of her apartment, the glow from her laptop screen casting long shadows around her. It was nearly midnight, but she couldn't bring herself to stop working. The files were endless, the discrepancies in the financial reports so complex that they seemed to shift under her gaze. Every number, every transaction seemed to hint at something bigger, something more sinister. Kenneth's words echoed in her mind, trust no one. The warning had stuck with her ever since their conversation. She couldn't afford to make any mistakes. She needed to stay focused, stay sharp. And yet, the deeper she dug into the company's finance, the more unsettling things became. The anomalies were not just errors. They were intentional, deliberate. Money that should have been in one account was missing, funneled elsewhere. Payments that made no sense, small enough to go unnoticed by most, but when pieced together, they told a story of corruption. Kenneth had trusted her with this task. He had placed his confidence in her, despite her lack of experience. And with that trust came an unspoken responsibility. If she uncovered the truth, it wouldn't just affect the company. It could destroy lives. It could ruin careers. But as the hours passed and the pile of documents grew taller, Debbie found herself believing more and more that this wasn't a simple mistake. It wasn't an isolated incident. There was something much bigger at play. It was as though a veil had been lifted from her eyes. She had always known that the corporate world could be ruthless, but she hadn't realized just how far it could go until now. The trust she had placed in Kenneth seemed more like an anchor than ever before. She knew she was part of something important now, something larger than herself. But she also understood the danger that came with it. Around 3 a.m. she found it. A document buried deep within the financial archives had a name that made her blood run cold. Vincent Harmon, the CFO, the man who was the most trusted financial officer in the company, the man who had access to everything, the man who was hiding something in plain sight. The file she opened revealed a series of irregular transfers, all pointing directly to accounts under his name. It was subtle, nothing overt, nothing that would trigger an audit. But the more Debbie compared the transactions, the clearer it became. Harmon had been siphoning off money for months, small amounts, hidden in a sea of legitimate transactions, but enough to make a significant impact. This wasn't just theft. It was a calculated act of sabotage. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the evidence. This wasn't a simple case of embezzlement. This was something more. The more she dug, the more it became apparent that Vincent Harmon had been strategically destroying Knowlton Enterprises from the inside, ensuring the company was weakened enough for him to take control. It wasn't just about money, it was about power. And Harmon had been using his position to leverage that power for his own gain. Debbie sat back in her chair, stunned. The truth was finally staring her in the face. The conspiracy was real, and it was bigger than she had imagined. She had the evidence, but she knew the risks involved in going public with it. This wasn't just about reporting a few missing dollars. This was about exposing a man who had been in control of the company's financial future. This was about taking down someone who had been so deeply embedded in the fabric of the company that his betrayal would be hard to believe. Debbie felt her stomach tighten. She had been right to trust Kenneth, but now that she had uncovered the truth, she was unsure how to move forward. If she took this evidence to the authorities, or even to Kenneth's board of directors, would she be protected? Would her job be at risk, or worse, would she become a target in this dangerous game? Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was Kenneth. "I need you to meet me as soon as possible. I think you found what we were looking for." Debbie's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment of truth. She had the evidence. She had uncovered the conspiracy. Now all she had to do was hand it over to Kenneth and trust that he would do the right thing. Her mind was spinning as she hurriedly gathered the documents, organizing them into a neat stack. She wasn't sure what to expect when she met with Kenneth. Would he be proud of her? Would he be impressed? Or would he be angry that she had uncovered something he hadn't fully anticipated? She arrived at Knowlton Enterprises shortly before noon, her heart racing. The building that had once seemed imposing now felt like a maze. She was walking into the belly of the beast, unsure of what would happen next. When she entered Kenneth's office, he was waiting for her, his expression unreadable. She placed the stack of papers on the desk between them, her hands shaking as she did so. "I found it," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "It's Vincent Harmon. He's the one behind everything." Kenneth didn't immediately respond. He studied the papers for a long moment, his brow furrowed. Finally, he looked up at her, his face hard but his eyes soft. "Good work, Debbie," he said, his voice low. "You've just uncovered the truth. This wasn't just a simple act of theft. This was sabotage. Harmon was planning to take over, weaken the company from the inside, and eventually control it. He's been playing a dangerous game." Debbie's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't fully realized the scope of what Harmon had done. It wasn't just about stealing money. It was about taking control of everything. "We need to act fast," Kenneth continued, his voice tightening. "We can't let him get away with this. But we also have to be careful. If we go after him too aggressively, it could destroy everything." Debbie nodded, her mind racing. This was bigger than she had thought. The stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. And now she was caught in the middle of it all. As Kenneth reached for the phone, his expression changed. "Debbie," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "there's something you need to understand. This isn't just about Vincent Harmon. This is about you too. You've seen what he's capable of, and now he knows that you're on to him." Debbie's heart skipped a beat. What did that mean for her? What did that mean for the future? Just follow along in this blockbuster story as the best is just unfolding, and don't forget to like and subscribe to be the first to be notified when new stories drop. Debbie's pulse raced as she watched Kenneth dial the number on his phone. The tension in the room was palpable, the silence thick with unspoken fears. His words, "This is about you too," echoed in her mind as she tried to piece together the fragments of what had just been revealed. She hadn't anticipated the magnitude of what was happening. What did he mean by that? Why had he said it in such a way? The phone rang as Kenneth's expression remained cold and distant, his focus now completely on the call. Debbie couldn't help but feel an uneasy knot in her stomach. She had known she was in deep, but now it felt like the walls were closing in on her. The deeper she went into the investigation, the more she began to realize that this wasn't just about financial discrepancies. This wasn't just a corporate crime. This was about power, and that power was capable of destroying everything. The next few days were a blur of frantic work and mounting pressure. Debbie threw herself into the investigation, convinced that she was on the verge of uncovering something that would shake Knowlton Enterprises to its core. But something was different. Files were being deleted. Security logs were wiped clean. She could feel it. Someone was trying to stop her. One morning, as she sat at her desk, sifting through another stack of documents, she noticed something strange. The financial reports she had been reviewing the night before were gone. She blinked, staring at the empty folders on her screen, her mind racing. Had she misfiled them? No, she knew she hadn't. These were the files that had shown the discrepancies. She checked the security logs, but those too were gone, completely wiped out. Her breath caught in her throat as panic surged. This wasn't just a mistake. Someone was actively working against her. The room felt smaller as she leaned back in her chair, her hands trembling. This wasn't a corporate error or a simple malfunction. This was deliberate. Someone within the company didn't want her to find the truth. Her phone buzzed. It was Kenneth. "We need to talk." Debbie arrived at Kenneth's office that afternoon, her mind racing with all the unanswered questions swirling in her head. She had hoped that he would have some answers, that he would tell her who was behind this. But when she walked in, she found him standing by the window, staring out at the city below. His posture was stiff, his eyes shadowed with something unreadable. "Debbie," he said, turning to face her, his voice low. "I know what's happening. I know what's been going on." Her heart skipped a beat. This was it. She was about to get answers. "They're trying to stop us," Kenneth continued, his eyes narrowing. "Someone within the company is covering their tracks. They know what we're doing. They know you're onto them. Debbie felt a chill run down her spine. The walls were closing in. Whoever was behind this wasn't just some low-level employee. This was someone who had the power to erase evidence, to delete files, to hide the truth. She opened her mouth to speak, but Kenneth held up his hand. "It's not just about Vincent Harmon anymore. This goes higher, much higher." Debbie's stomach dropped. "Higher? How high?" "Do you know what's at stake here?" Kenneth asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "This isn't just about money, it's about control, and they'll stomp at nothing to keep it." She tried to absorb his words, but the more she thought about them, the more confusing it all became. Who were they? And what exactly did Kenneth know about all of this? The threats had become more frequent, and they were starting to get more personal. At first, it was just an email, an anonymous warning telling her to back off. Then her phone began to ring with blocked numbers. There were no messages, just silence. But the fear was there, pressing against her chest like a vice. The strange thing was, the threats didn't seem to come from Vincent Harmon. Whoever was behind this didn't want to take the money. They wanted to keep the control. And that power? It was something that ran much deeper than just financial gain. Kenneth's behavior had also changed. At first, he had been supportive, encouraging her to dig deeper. But now he seemed distant. Protective, yes, but distant. He had started to pull away, not just from her, but from the entire investigation, and it made Debbie uneasy. What was he hiding? Why was he suddenly so guarded? A week later, as the threats continued to grow, Kenneth called Debbie into his office again. This time he was much more serious. His posture was rigid, his face unreadable. "Debbie," he said quietly, "I think it's time you stop the investigation." Debbie froze, her breath catching in her throat. "What?" she whispered. "What do you mean, stop?" "I mean it," Kenneth said, his voice harder now. "This is getting dangerous. They know who you are now. They know you're getting too close. It's time to step away before things get worse." Debbie's heart pounded in her chest. She had fought so hard to get to this point. She had uncovered so much. But now Kenneth was asking her to walk away. She couldn't. She couldn't just stop now. "No," she said, her voice steady, but her hands shaking. "I can't back down. Not now. Not when I'm this close." Kenneth's eyes darkened as he stepped closer. "Debbie, listen to me. This is bigger than you. I can handle it. You don't need to get caught up in this." Her mind raced. What was Kenneth not telling her? Why was he suddenly so insistent on her stopping the investigation? What had he been hiding all along? "I've seen how far they're willing to go," Kenneth said, his voice cold. "And I'm not willing to let you be the one who pays the price for it." Debbie's heart skipped a beat as she realized the gravity of his words. Was he protecting her? Or was he trying to stop her from uncovering something even more dangerous than she had imagined? Debbie sat at her desk, the weight of her discoveries heavy on her shoulders. The office was empty now, the usual hustle and bustle of the day replaced by a suffocating silence. It had been a long, exhausting week, but tonight she felt like she was finally close to the truth. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she stared at the screen. She had gone through every document, every file, every piece of data she could find. And now the evidence was in front of her, undeniable. A trail of emails, carefully hidden in plain sight, that led straight to Vincent Harmon, the CFO of Knowlton Enterprises, the man who had been siphoning off money, manipulating the company's financial systems, and destabilizing the empire Kenneth had worked so hard to build. Debbie's pulse quickened as she reread the emails. They were dated months back, but the chain of correspondence was clear. Harmon had been colluding with an unknown group, using his position to manipulate the company's assets for personal gain. The amount of money involved was staggering. Millions of dollars siphoned off, each transaction disguised as routine business expenses. It was a well-oiled machine of corruption, hidden in the folds of Knowlton Enterprises' financial reports. This was it, the smoking gun. She could feel the walls closing in on her, the threats, the warnings from Kenneth, the sudden tension in the office. She had known all along that she was walking a dangerous line, but now she had the evidence to bring it all down. But as she prepared to confront Vincent, the reality of what she was about to do hit her. The pieces were falling into place, but something didn't feel right. She had suspected it before, but now it was becoming clear. Kenneth had known about this. He had been watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. He had asked her to dig to find the truth, but in doing so, had he been manipulating her all along? Debbie leaned back in her chair, the weight of the truth pressing on her chest. She thought about everything that had happened, the mysterious phone calls, the deleted files, the late nights spent sifting through financial reports. Kenneth had played his part, guiding her through the maze, but had he ever truly trusted her? Or had he simply been using her to get to the heart of the conspiracy? She couldn't ignore it any longer. She had to confront him. She had to know the truth. When Debbie entered Kenneth's office, the air was thick with unspoken tension. The blinds were drawn, casting the room in shadows. Kenneth sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable as he glanced up at her. "You've found it, haven't you?" he asked, his voice low, calm. Debbie didn't sit. She stood, her back straight, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I've found everything. Vincent Harmon's been running a financial scheme within the company for months. He's been taking millions, manipulating accounts, covering his tracks with sophisticated methods." Kenneth nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I know." Debbie's heart skipped a beat. "You knew?" she repeated, her voice rising in disbelief. "You knew about all of this?" Kenneth didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. He placed them on the desk, and Debbie recognized the same emails she had found earlier. The same trail that led straight to Vincent Harmon. "I've known for a while," Kenneth said, his voice steady. "I had to wait for the right moment. I couldn't act too quickly, or we'd both be at risk." Debbie felt her stomach churn. The realization was dawning on her. Everything she had discovered, everything she had worked for, had been part of a bigger plan. Kenneth had never been as transparent as he'd made himself out to be. He had been playing her, just as much as he had been playing Vincent. "You used me," she said, her voice cold. "You brought me into this, made me dig through these files, made me uncover this conspiracy, and now I realize you knew about it all along." Kenneth's eyes darkened as he stood up from his desk. "Debbie, I never meant for you to get hurt. I brought you in because I needed someone who could see things clearly, someone who wouldn't be bogged down by the politics of this company. I thought you could help me expose this, but I had to keep you at arm's length. I had to protect you from what was going on. I didn't want you to get caught up in the chaos." Debbie's heart pounded in her chest. "Protect me?" she repeated, her voice rising in anger. "You wanted to protect me, but you never trusted me enough to tell me the truth." Kenneth's face softened for a moment. "I trusted you more than you realize," he said, his voice quieter now. "But I had to be careful. You didn't know what you were stepping into. This wasn't just about exposing a few missing dollars. This was about taking down someone who had been embedded in this company for years. Someone who was willing to destroy everything to get what he wanted." Debbie shook her head, her frustration building. "You could have told me the truth. You could have trusted me." Kenneth paused, his eyes searching hers. "I couldn't risk it. I had to make sure you were safe. You've done more than I ever expected. You've proven yourself, Debbie, but now we're at a crossroads." She took a step back, her mind racing. "So what happens now? What do we do about Harmon?" Kenneth's expression hardened, and he leaned forward, his voice low. "Now we finished this, but it's not going to be easy. We have to act fast, or this whole company could fall apart." Debbie felt a mix of dread and determination flood her body. She had come this far. She had uncovered the conspiracy. Now there was no turning back. But as she opened her mouth to speak, the door to Kenneth's office creaked open. A figure stepped inside, and Debbie's heart stopped. The last person she expected to see stood in the doorway. Vincent Harmon, the man she had just exposed. He was smiling, and it wasn't a smile of surprise. It was a smile of someone who knew exactly what was coming next. Debbie froze in the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. There, standing in Kenneth's office, was Vincent Harmon, the man she had spent the last few weeks uncovering. The man who had been orchestrating the sabotage from within Knowlton Enterprises. His presence seemed to fill the room, and his smile sent a chill down her spine. It wasn't the surprise, caught-off-guard grin of someone who had just been exposed. It was a smug, knowing smile, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "You've been busy," Vincent said, his voice smooth and controlled. His eyes flickered between Kenneth and Debbie, the same calculating glint in his gaze that Debbie had seen in the emails. "Did you really think you could hide everything forever?" Kenneth stood up from his chair, his expression hardening as he faced Vincent. "It's over, Vincent," Kenneth said, his voice calm but unwavering. "You've been stealing from the company for months, and now I've had enough." Vincent laughed softly as though the whole situation was some kind of joke. "You really think you've won?" he asked, his tone dripping with arrogance. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." But just as Vincent took a step forward, ready to argue further, the door to the office opened. Two security officers entered, their presence commanding. "Mr. Harmon, you're under arrest for embezzlement and conspiracy to defraud Knowlton Enterprises," one of them said, pulling out handcuffs. Vincent's smug smile faded for just a moment, and for the first time, Debbie saw something akin to fear flash in his eyes. But it was too late. They had him. As the officers escorted Vincent out of the office, Kenneth turned to Debbie. His expression was unreadable, his eyes focused on the door as it closed behind Vincent. For a long moment, there was silence between them, and then Kenneth finally spoke. "You did it," he said, his voice soft but filled with admiration. "You found the truth. You exposed him." Debbie nodded slowly, still processing everything that had just unfolded. She had known that this moment was coming, but actually witnessing Vincent being led out of the building, his head hung low in defeat, was a surreal experience. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Kenneth walked over to her, his gaze steady. "You've proven yourself, Debbie. You're more than just someone I hired to help. You've changed the course of this company. You've saved it." Debbie's heart swelled with pride. It wasn't just about saving the company anymore. It was about her transformation, her journey from struggling single mom to someone who had made a real difference. And as much as she had tried to fight it, she realized now that her connection with Kenneth had deepened in ways she hadn't fully understood until this moment. Kenneth placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. "And now I want to offer you something more." Debbie's pulse quickened. Was this it? Was he about to offer her a permanent position at the company? Was this the moment that would change everything? "I want you to stay," Kenneth continued, "not just as an employee, but as a partner, in business and in life." Debbie's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure what she had been expecting, but this was more than she could have imagined. She had fought so hard to get to this point, but now she realized that she wasn't just fighting for her own survival anymore. She was fighting for something more, something bigger than herself. Kenneth stepped closer, his voice softening. "I never expected to find someone like you, Debbie. You've shown me that strength comes in many forms. You've proven that you can stand up to the toughest of challenges, and I believe you're more than capable of handling whatever comes next. Together we can make this company everything it was meant to be." Debbie's eyes filled with emotion. She hadn't expected this kind of offer, this kind of connection. She thought she had been just another employee, another person who might fade into the background. But here she was, standing beside Kenneth, someone who had helped her realize her potential, someone who had seen in her what she hadn't been able to see in herself. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I never expected any of this." Kenneth smiled, his eyes soft. "You don't have to say anything. I just want you to know that you belong here, not just in the company, but in my life." Debbie's heart swelled. The future that had once seemed so uncertain now felt full of possibility. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And with Kenneth by her side, the world felt different. It felt like a place she could carve out a future in, a future that was hers to shape. Later that evening, as she walked through her apartment door, Debbie's gaze landed on Gabriel, who was playing on the floor. He looked up at her and smiled, his tiny face lighting up with joy. Debbie dropped to her knees beside him, pulling him into her arms. "I did it, Gabe," she whispered, kissing the top of his head. "We did it." She felt his small arms wrap around her neck, and for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. The weight of her worries, of her struggles, seemed to lift. The path ahead was still unclear, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't facing it alone anymore. The phone buzzed in her pocket, interrupting the quiet moment. She pulled it out, smiling when she saw Kenneth's name on the screen. "Dinner tomorrow, we can talk about the future." Debbie smiled to herself as she typed back a quick reply. "I'd like that." Debbie had changed her life, and Kenneth's. What started as a mistaken text message had led to so much more. A business transformation, a journey of self-discovery, and a love story that neither of them had expected. As she held Gabriel close, Debbie realized that the future was no longer something to fear. It was something to build together. With Kenneth by her side, anything seemed possible. And as she looked at Gabriel, safe and secure in her arms, she knew that the best was yet to come. Have you ever found yourself in such a situation? Drop your comments below.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.